Happy almost Purim. Talking about Purim. Why does the Megillah require us to hear every single word? Unlike any other Torah reading or any reading of the biblical nature, the Megillah is the only one where the Code of Jewish Law says that if we miss a single word, it invalidates the reading, and you need to hear the whole thing again. And I know that because I've read the Megillah so many times for so many people, maybe hundreds, ever since my bar mitzvah. I read it maybe somewhere between 5 to 10 times every Purim. So the questions and our job as a reader is to make sure that everyone can hear every word. And it's especially difficult when you have rooms full of children or even adults who boo at every Haman and shake their grogger, shake, shake, shake. So, why is it that the Megillah needs us to hear every single word, unlike anything else? One of the explanations, beautiful explanations, is that the Megillah is not just a story. It's actually a blueprint of divine providence, of what we call hashgacha pratis, about how God runs the world. But we see that more in the story of Purim than in most any other places. Hashgacha pratis, divine providence. We see that even if one piece of the story is missing, the whole story doesn't make sense. On that note, on a very painful note, this running commentary is dedicated to a family, Kuravsky. There's a baby boy, Benyamin Zachariah, who was taken about 1 year old, very tragically, from his family. So, in his memory, and also in the dedication of the birth of his baby brother, who was born exactly a year later, on his date of his yahrzeit, on the date of his passing, which was a sign from God, for sure. And this is one family that are faithful listeners to this running commentary. I'm very grateful for their connection, and they sponsored this week. You can sponsor another one. So, the Purim story took years to unfold. There were many painful parts of the Purim story. It was a mysterious story. And this story in the Kuravsky's life is also mysterious, with no justifications at all. But we'll connect it to the Purim story. At every stage, no one could really imagine how the seemingly unconnected and often painful moments would be leading to the miraculous salvation of the Jewish people. I'm in Cain Park now, Cleveland Heights. A king's drunken party, the queen's defiance, an orphan girl taken to the palace, a Jewish girl. Each moment and each time, each event seemed like a disconnected episode. A coincidental assassination plot overheard by Mordechai. A delayed reward. A sleepless night. Sounds like a movie. Random events. Until suddenly they weren't. Only in hindsight did the full picture emerge, revealing that every detail was a necessary step towards the redemption of the Jewish people. Famous man Steve Jobs, founder of Apple, in his commencement speech, reflecting on his own life journeys, he said that he had dropped out of college. He had no room, no dorm to sleep in, no place to sleep. He collected bottles and sold them to the stores to get a few cents for clothing, for food. Actually, for food, he would go walk miles to a temple that would serve the food. And then he found this seemingly irrelevant free class of calligraphy and typography. And that's what he studied. And that became the defining feature of the Mac later on, where he founded Apple, the Macintosh. He created the first Mac. And it was because of his free class. And he said, in his speech, he said that our life is full of dots. Paraphrasing, he says, every dot is a moment in time. And you can't really connect all the dots as they happen looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you need to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. Purim teaches us exactly that. We need to trust that every detail, every word of our personal Megillah is part of a greater story, even when it doesn't seem that way in the moment. If you miss one word in the Megillah or in your life story, it doesn't fully make sense. And that's why we need to hear every word, because the lesson of Purim is that no moment is extra and no detail is random. Can you see this in your life situation, where something that seemed negative at first became positive? You realize it was positive later on? Shalom Aleichem. Maybe you lost a job to find a better one. Maybe you missed a flight to discover a reason. We all have moments in our lives that a setback actually is a step forward, only realized later on. The true story of a man, a Jewish boy, who applied for a job at a prestigious financial company in New York. He had all the qualifications, and in his interview went amazing. He was sure he had the job. In the paperwork, there was a question there: have you ever been arrested? Now, years earlier, he was arrested for something he didn't do. No good deeds go unpunished. I know that in many ways, but we don't harbor on that. He actually was trying to save a friend who was in an accident, so he told the cops that he was the driver, but he really wasn't, because his friend didn't have a license, and he would have been much more trouble. And it was a fake. It wasn't him. And nobody was hurt. It was just that he was arrested. And then now, 20 years later, or 10 years later, whatever it was, he wasn't being hired for the company, this prestigious financial company that he expected to be hired at because of this. 10 years later, he called his friend over, who he hadn't spoken to for a long time, said, I need to tell you something. And he says that, I just want to tell you, it sounded harsh, but you saved my life. How so? Or God saved my life. Because days after his application didn't go through, failed, 9/11 happened. His office was in the World Trade Center. That's where he would have been working on that time, in that moment. And because of this fake arrest, or this arrest that wasn't warranted, he was saved. So each dot, each moment along the way along the road is a necessary step for our development and for our life. And our challenge is to embrace every moment, and knowing that it's leading to something greater. But this is, of course, not a justification for us to minimize the struggles or to justify the suffering of other people. Never can we justify someone else's suffering. All these teachings are similar. Teachings are teachings to teach us how we approach our own lives, how we can judge ourselves, not others. And these are conclusions that everybody needs to arrive on their own. Going back to the Purim story, Mordechai responds to Esther when she says, who am I to go to the king? I haven't been called to the king for 30 days, etc., etc. And Mordechai's response encapsulates this idea. Mordechai tells her, if you remain silent, if you remain silent in this moment, the salvation will come from another place. God will take care of the world, but you and your father's household, your lineage, will be lost forever. Umi yodea, and who knows? If for this moment, higat lamalchut, you were sent to kingdom. You were given this royalty. Our Rebbe says that mi yodea, when Mordechai was saying who knows, he wasn't asking a rhetorical question. He was saying who, the great who, the one and only who that truly exists, knows. Mi yodea, that le'et kazot, that this is the moment you were put into this position for. So even when things in our lives seem accidental or random or painful, and they are, but they're still part of the larger tapestry woven by the divine providence, by God Almighty. Now, sometimes we see it, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we see how the dots connect in our lives, sometimes soon after, sometimes later on, sometimes in years later, sometimes never. But we listen to every word of the Megillah, and we remember that every part of the story matters. We trust that God runs the world, and we can't see the whole picture, but God does. The artist does. The author does. Gratitude to Rabbi Ashkenazi for teaching this beautiful teaching based on the Rebbe's teachings. I'm in Cain Park right now. Fun fact, aside from the fact that I haven't been here for about 35 years or more, 40 years. I was here, we went sledding as a kid. This is the first art amphitheater. It was built here. I just passed it actually. This is the first, built in 1930s, first national art theater that was built in the 30s during the Great Depression to provide work for people. And last but not least, Purim, well, it's over there. Purim is it's tomorrow night, Thursday night. The most important thing is to observe the 4 mitzvahs of Purim. 4 mitzvahs are to hear the Megillah twice, Thursday night and Friday day. And Purim itself is to give gifts of food to friends, men to men, women to women. That's the theater that was made in the 30s. That is still running today. The oldest national theater in America. And the 3rd mitzvah is to give tzedakah to the poor. And finally, the last mitzvah that not everybody knows about, and even fewer observe, unfortunately, but it is one of the mitzvahs of Purim, is to have a Purim feast, Seudat Purim. And because it's Friday, it's supposed to be, this year, the feast is supposed to be before midday. Midday is a halachic midday. In Cleveland, it's about 1:30 p.m. It's not exactly 12 p.m. That's it for today. God bless you. Everyone should have a happy Purim. Happy always. And I'll see you on the other side of joy.